Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today we're going to be doing the ultimate guide to the Spanish for Age of Empires 2, and let's just hop right into it and see what the civilization has to offer for us. The Spanish is a really classic civilization and it's been with us for a really long time in Age of Empire history, and throughout the course of its lifetime in the game, it actually remained conceptually unchanged. A lot of the options that it once had are still available, and although we did move a few numbers around here and there, the main idea of the Civ did remain unchanged, and to this day it fills a role in which other civilizations can't really fill for both 1v1 and team game. And so while it might not be the most flexible or the most powerful civilization, it actually has a decent amount of options in its own right with the tech tree, and it has a lot of really powerful options that a lot of other civs don't get access to. So let's go ahead and take a look at the technology tree and see what we're working with here with the Spanish. So the Spanish are described as a gunpowder and monk civilization. Their bonuses are as follows. The builders work 30% faster, which is a really nice bonus at getting your castles down quicker, your walls up quicker, and even works on your farms. This is a really good bonus, especially on maps like Nomad, where you can get your town center faster up than other civilizations, which leads to a villager lead early on in the game, which as we know is one of the best things you can do for your economy in Age of Empires. The next bonus is that blacksmith upgrades don't cost gold. So not only does this save you direct amount of resources when you're playing the Spanish, but you're also saving one of the most valuable resources in late game, which is gold. This really helps tech into some of your more gold heavy options for the Spanish, which is just a really nice thing to have in the mid and late game. The next bonus is a little bit more of a niche one, but it's the fact that cannon galleons benefit from ballistics and they fire faster and more accurately. Now they actually fire a lot faster, which is really interesting, and I would say that cannon galleons are one of the biggest strengths that the Spanish have on the water, and something that other civilizations might not expect, especially if you get water control in some sort of like a team game map. You can just run around the shore and just snipe all their castles with cannon galleons, and they're going to be out of range of the castle and they attack a lot quicker than other cannon galleons. Really strong bonus in certain niche situations. And their last bonus is that gunpowder units fire 18% faster. This isn't the biggest of deals, but it helps your hand cannoneer a little bit, and obviously we know how strong the conquistadors are, but if you don't, we're going to be checking that out a bit later on. Conquistador is of course the unique unit they can make from the castle. However, they do have another unique unit from the monastery, and this is the missionary. More on him a bit later. The unique techs are Inquisition and Supremacy. Inquisition and Castle Age, so that's monks convert faster, and Supremacy gives villagers extra combat stats for the Imperial Age tech, and their team bonus is a very relevant one. It's the fact that trade units generate plus 25% gold. Alright, let's take a look at the tech tree now and see what kind of options we can go for. The first thing you'll notice is that they don't even get the crossbow tech, so the archery range is going to be pretty weak in terms of the early game options. No crossbowman means you're forced into elite skirmisher, which they do get, and cavalry archer with thumb ring, which is not too bad, as well as heavy cav archer and hand cannoneer in Imperial Age. You are missing Parthian tactics though. For their barracks, it's once again fully teched out. You got supplies, squires, and arson, and both halberdier and champions fully teched, so a lot of options there in the barracks. And of course their stable, pretty solid as well, with paladin and hussar fully upgraded. So as you can see, besides missing crossbow, we have a lot of different options that we can go for in the three production buildings. Their siege is okay with siege ram and bomber cannon available, but missing siege onager and heavy scorpion, so definitely a decent mix there for the Spanish. And their blacksmith is fully teched out, once again proving how strong the Spanish can be in late game with all the different options on this tech tree. Fully teched out blacksmith, and they don't even cost gold to get all these precious upgrades. The dock has all the upgrades available, which is amazing. So although you don't get any direct bonus for the water, you have all the options available to you. The university is pretty average, missing siege engineers, but you do get bomber tower, which is nice. And then for the conquistador, basically the conquistador is the main strength of the Spanish. It costs 60 food and 70 gold. Think of it as a mounted hand cannoneer, but it does a ton of damage, and the biggest strength of the conquistador is that it doesn't need a lot of upgrades to actually do a lot of damage. In fact, it needs no upgrades for its damage, and the only thing that affects its damage output is the elite upgrade. And so it's just a really strong unit right out the gate that comes out and is incredibly hard to deal with. Its biggest weakness is going to be skirms and monks if they can land the conversions. However, monks are a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you run up close, you can pretty much 2 or 3 shot the monk, or 1 shot the monk with 2 or 3 conquistadors, I should say. Their monastery is once again fully teched out with all the technologies available, as well as the missionary. Now the missionary is just a mounted monk, and he can't pick up relics, but he has 7 range and he can convert units and heal units like a regular monk. So having less range but more mobility can make him pretty decent in certain areas. He also benefits from husbandry and bloodlines from the stable, so he has a little bit of extra upgrades that go into him, but it does make him stronger on paper than the actual monk. And as far as the eco upgrades go, they have pretty much all you'll need, so there's not really a big issue there. So now that we've taken a look at the tech tree, let's go ahead and think about what the strengths of the Spanish are and some of their biggest weaknesses when playing maybe some 1v1 Arabia games or just a little bit more of a team game situation as well for them. So the thing you have to understand right off the bat is that for your 1v1 games, your Spanish is basically down a whole team bonus because that only helps with your trade. Unless you're trading with the enemy, you're not going to be able to make use of that. So it's a very risky bonus to take advantage of in 1v1, and we're essentially down a bonus right off the bat. This isn't a big deal because we do have a few other bonuses to work with that are pretty solid. However, once again, another weakness of the Spanish, those bonuses tend to only kick in very well in the mid and late game, because early game you're not going to be saving too much gold from your blacksmith. Most of the upgrades only cost food and a little bit of gold, and the building bonus that you get, building a little bit faster, doesn't really help out too much in the early game when you have so few builds anyways that you're not going to be building that many buildings or that much big buildings that actually save you a lot of time when you have that building bonus come in. It does, however, help with the tower rush, which is somewhat nice. And of course, one last weakness for the Spanish in the early game is the fact that they're lacking crossbow really limits their options as to what you can go for in that early game. To play around these weaknesses, we now have to think about some of the strengths that the Spanish have, just to kind of understand how we want to play to avoid our weaknesses and play towards our strengths. Now, the biggest strength for the Spanish is by far their unique unit, the Conquistador. So in every single game you play as the Spanish, you need to be thinking, how can I get to Conquistador in a timely manner and while staying safe and not being too predictable? You do have a couple options that are pretty solid in Castle Age. One of them is going to be Knight Skirm, the other one is just going to be to boom it up, and the third one is going to be to run into Conquistadors as fast as you can with a castle drop. Now, to get to these positions, common openings with the Spanish are as follows: Scout Rush into fully walling your base, and then maybe a few skirms to defend if your opponent has some archers on the field. You can also go for a Tower Rush, which is not a bad option because it sets you up on stone. So after your Tower Rush is over, you can have a decent development at home, up to Castle Age, and then just drop the castle because you're already mining stone. And you can also build a couple defensive towers to help protect you against some archers. Once you get to the Castle Age, going for Conquistadors and mixing in some monks and siege to help out is a really good tactic. I wouldn't advise rushing to Conquistadors with the Spanish, however, because although it's their biggest strength, it could also be extremely predictable. Similar to how the Goths are predictable with their infantry, the Spanish are pretty predictable with their Conquistadors. So if you're playing against a competent opponent, he's going to be aware of the threat of the Conquistador and prepare accordingly. So my biggest advice for the Spanish is to try to mix it up in the early game and find a way to get to the Conquistador in which your opponent can't already have a ready counter. The biggest counters to the Conquistador is, as I mentioned, the Skirmisher and the monks with upgrades. So if you just keep him off Skirmisher, it can be very good to go for your Conquistador, and that does very well against massed archers once you get the +2 defense on it, as well as bloodlines and husbandry in that mid game. So the biggest game plan with the Spanish is to really go for a solid opening that lets you play somewhat more defensively in the early game. Even a Tower Rush can be a defensive opening because you can use that initial Tower Rush to buy yourself time and secure your map at home. The worst thing you can do with the Spanish is enter an all-out feudal war with your opponent, and where you're going for a ton of scouts, a ton of archers, because of course you can't upgrade those archers and you get no bonuses in the feudal age to help you with your scout play compared to some other civilizations that could have a ton of bonuses, like the Huns who don't need houses and the Magyars who are getting all that discount on their scouts. So it's really not the best full feudal scout civilization, and not the best civilization to stay stuck in feudal age that long as well. One of the biggest downsides I haven't mentioned as far as to staying extended feudal age fights is the fact that you still want to go Conquistadors in Castle Age, but if you do an extended feudal age, your opponent will have a ton of resources and a ton of army already out on the field, and so by the time you build your castle and start massing your Conquistadors, it might be too late and you'll miss that crucial timing that you have to mass your Conquistadors and be able to pressure your opponent with them. So it's really a unit that depends a lot on the timing. You can't go too early into them and you can't go too late into them. The best Spanish players find the right timing to hit with the Conquistador where they're hard to counter and also a little bit hard to predict as well. Alright, so now that we know where the strengths of the Spanish lie, mainly in the Conquistador and some Knight, Monk, and Siege play in the mid game, let's take a look at some of their power spikes as well as their late game options so you guys know what to do past that initial game plan. Now, their biggest power spike is, once again, the Conquistador in that early Castle Age. Drop the castle, make the Conquistador, and I highly recommend that you pair it up with Monk when you're up against Knights or Cav Archers or something that's like a very expensive unit. And if you're up against mass Skirmishers or mass Crossbow, just mix in some Siege and you'll be totally fine. Mangonel and Conquistador is a really strong composition, and then monks to help get some conversions and pick up relics is a really smart thing to do when you have map control when your opponent is going for cavalry units. If for whatever reason Conquistador isn't great in this matchup or you don't have access to stone, then definitely just stick with their stable units and mix in some monks or missionaries to help you control the game, heal up your units, and pick up some relics, because we need to have a solid setup into late game to make use of the Spanish broad tech tree. Past that initial Conquistador power spike, unfortunately Spanish don't have a very nice secondary power spike, and so my best recommendation for this civilization is to really just try to drag the game into late game and make use of the fact that you're saving so much gold on the blacksmith upgrades and the fact that you have a ton of options in the late game. You have fully upgraded skirmishers, you have very strong cav archers, you have conquistadors, you can mass and go for elite conk, you have supremacy on your villagers, which lets you go for effective bombard tower rushes or just keeps you secure from raids, which is a really good plus in that late game. You also have fully upgraded paladin and hussar, and you also have infantry like halberdier and champion that are fully upgraded. As you can see, a ton of options to work with, not to mention their strong siege with siege ram and bombard cannon. So like I said, make use of that initial power spec of the conquistadors, and if, for whatever reason, if that doesn't work and you can't end the game with that, just develop into a late game where you can choose from all the different options you have to set yourself up against whatever your opponent is going for. Make sure to constantly scout your opponents and to be able to actively counter what they're going for. Some strong matchups for the Spanish are actually civilizations that depend a lot on cavalry units. I'm not gonna lie, you could be pretty weak against some strong archer civs because conquistadors are not very good against archer civs, and if you're being forced to play like skirmisher and knights with the Spanish, although it's not too bad, it is pretty weak because you don't have that many bonuses for that, and so you're basically forced to play a pretty generic civilization into that composition, which like I said could be okay in certain cases but isn't a very good game plan. So the worst matchups for the Spanish is just going to be strong archer civs, namely Britons, Ethiopians, Mayans, those kind of civilizations that really can be very oppressive with their timings and don't let you get to conquistadors at all. And on the flip side, the best matchups for the Spanish are the ones that depend a lot on their cavalry, like the Franks, the Bulgarians, or the Burgundians, who really want to get out a lot of their cavalry in the early game and try to control the map that way, while conquistadors completely dominate that kind of matchup, and if they invest into 2 staple knights and you're going for conquistadors, you're basically guaranteed to be able to 2-shot their knights, and they have very little counterplay once you get to like 5 or 6 conquistadors. And like I said, pair it up with a couple monks, you can heal up your conquistadors, so even if they get damaged a little bit, you heal them right back up to full HP. You can pick up relics and even get a couple conversions when they try to go for those big engagements. Also, once you get to that late game setup against those civilizations, conquistador into halberdier is an almost impossible composition for the cav civs to counter, and they're almost forced into one option, which is the skirmisher, and as soon as they go for skirmisher, you can tech into hussar. So hussar, conquistador, and halberdier just makes for a really strong setup into that late game, and you can't lose against cavalry civilizations if you play your timing right with the conks. So what maps do the Spanish excel on, and which maps should they really avoid being picked on? Well, the Spanish excel a lot on Nomad. In fact, it's probably considered the best 1v1 Nomad civilization because you get the town center up really fast, and then you can easily develop into a fast conquistador play as well. They're also extremely good on hideouts, Redesite Fortress, and Arena because you start with a little bit of walls and a little bit of security that helps you skip that early game and end up straight into that conquistador timing that you want to hit. And with just a couple of petards, you can easily break through the walls on some of these maps and force your opponent to face your conks directly. And of course, if you don't end the game with that timing, you can easily pick up some relics from the map and secure yourself to a really solid late game, in which I already mentioned how flexible the Spanish really are. The maps they're not the best on are hybrid maps that force you to kind of play a lot in the early game to contest water and land at the same time, and those are the worst maps for Spanish and the ones that I'd advise you to avoid picking Spanish on unless you have a very good reason to go for them. On Arabia, they're just okay. They can be played against some civilizations and have some success, but against most civilizations, you're probably going to get abused in the early game against competent players. So I would say pick them with caution on Arabia, and although they're not bad, they're very hard to get by in most matchups. On pure water maps like Islands and Team Islands, they're not bad in terms of their tech tree, but they don't get any special bonuses to help them out in their water play. So again, you might fall behind versus some of the stronger water civs. However, they're not that bad on those maps. The last thing I'll mention is that for team games, Spanish is excellent in the pocket position because you have very solid scouts into knight play, you have fully upgraded paladins, and you also get that trade bonus that helps your trade kick in faster and helps you secure more gold for your entire team, which is a really strong bonus in those drawn out games. You also have the option of going conquistador or tower rush on the flank for the team games in some of those weird or messy kind of games or maps. So in conclusion, Spanish is really not the civ that you can just pick up and go for those standard openings and expect to have success by playing extremely aggressive in the early game and kind of just develop in a more standard fashion. It's really a civilization that you want to be extremely intelligent with and calculated with your steps, because you can't afford to make mistakes and spend more time in the early parts of the game, whereas you want to just kind of turbo to your power spikes and make use of them as fast as possible to be able to close out games in good time with the Spanish. And of course, if you like a good flexible late game civilization, it's a fantastic option to pick up the Spanish for that exact purpose. And for me, the Spanish is a little bit more of an underrated civilization because although, like I said, they're not a straightforward civ, they're a civilization that if played correctly can catch your opponent off guard, and they can do something that no other civilization can do, which is, like I said, conquistadors. It's really their best option, and in my opinion, it really makes the civ be as good as it could be in certain situations. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed the content, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like these. See ya, take care, stay safe, peace.